Okay, hello and welcome to the third webinar of the EAL network. Today's topic, more advanced EAL learners. I'm your network lead, Matthew Lee, Head of Inclusion. It's wonderful to see everybody again during this delightful Ramadan period. So today we have three speakers to break the mold. We've got Kawinder Maud from Durham University. He'll be talking about mostly writing. And then we'll also have Rula and Nur, who I'm delighted to introduce because they teach at ICS, and we'll hopefully have a bit more of a practical implementation focused EAL workshop today, because that's something that we've been lacking over the last three series. So without further ado, I'll be passing over to Kawinder Maud. Kawinder Maud, she's currently an assistant professor at Durham University, specialising in primary English after working at Kingston University in London for 5 years. She's got over 20 years working across a range of fields, including as Head of Inclusion, EAL, and India and England, I believe. Is that right, Kawinder?
Yes, yeah.
Obviously, she's got her master's degree modules in English and EAL related topics, and she's currently researching teaching and pedagogy in relation to primary English, looking at English as additional language in particular. So I will pass you over to good luck.
Thank you, Matthew. I believe that, oh yeah, so I can see the slides now. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's good morning because it's 11 o'clock where I am, and I believe it's 2 o'clock in Jordan, so good afternoon to you all. I'm Kawinder Maud, Assistant Professor in the School of Education at Durham University, and thank you very much for inviting me today to participate in your CPT conversations. May I have the next slide, please, Matthew? Matthew, next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now, today, in the next 20 minutes to follow, we'll focus on highlighting particular challenges faced by advanced EAL learners in learning to write fluently. We'll also consider the role of cohesion in writing in a second language, cohesive devices, the use of those. And lastly, we'll discuss the role of explicit teaching of academic language in and out of the classroom. So without any further delay, we'll make a start. Thank you. So, a model for EAL proficiency, commonly known as BICS and CALP. Now, these are terms which are commonly used in discussion of bilingual education. They arise from the early works of Jim Cummings, where he demonstrated his ideas about second language development. BICS describes the development of conversational fluency in a second language, hence the term basic interpersonal communicative skills. Whereas CALP, that describes the use of language in decontextualized academic situations. So that is why the term cognitive academic language proficiency. Cummings also describes language proficiency in terms of surface and deeper levels of thinking skills. He argues that the deeper levels of cognitive processing, such as analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, are absolutely necessary for academic progress. But it is important to note that as a group, teachers may be misled by the oral fluency demonstrated by more advanced learners of EAL into underestimating their need for specific targeted teaching in order to develop the writing. One more thing to remember is that writing cannot be considered in isolation, because it's so intimately linked with reading and thinking skills. Next slide, please, Matthew. Thank you. Before we go any further, let's consider what effective writers do well. Well, effective writers are likely to think about and plan their writing very much, at least in a general way, before they even begin. They understand that writing is a recursive process, but writers continually revise and edit at all stages, from first draft to final product. They are also able to anticipate the needs of the reader. They do so by including enough information about the topic so that the reader can make sense of what he or she is reading. And they also use clear signaling devices such as connectives and conjunctions to show the reader how the ideas are linked with each other. Effective readers are aware of the linguistic differences between writing and speaking. And they know very well that written language is not just speech written down. They understand the cultural purpose of the text and how to organize the major ideas coherently. So that's what effective writers do and what they look like. On the other hand, poor writers are much less likely to take account of the features that I have just mentioned. They may focus primarily on the mechanics of writing, such as spelling, and they're often overly concerned with correctness. As a result, there may be a lack of confidence to write at length or writing in new ways. They tend not to plan at a whole text level, and they are less able to use language, again, provide enough content information that the reader will need in order to understand and anticipate their writing. Their writing tends to be more speech written down, and they probably have difficulty in revising and editing their own work. Therefore, young EAL learners learning to write in English, especially the ones who are not ready to write literate in another language, they have even more to learn about writing. Next slide, please, Matthew. Thank you. Now that we sort of have a little background about what effective writers do and what less effective writers look like, let's talk about cohesion in writing. Now, writing involves a complex variety of tasks, of skills, including transcription, which is spelling and letter formation, language-based skills, such as word choice, lexical variations, sophistication and construction of grammatically correct sentences. Children also need to understand the appropriate use of punctuation to convey their intended meaning to readers effectively. They also need to learn about how to use a range of cohesive markers like connectives and pronouns. This brings me to the definition of, offered by Crossley, Kyle, and McNamara, who define cohesion as presence or absence of linguistic cues in the text that allow the reader to make connections between the ideas in the text. And studies have shown that EAL writing samples where there is a better use of cohesive devices are rated as better quality of texts than those with fewer cohesive markers. Next slide, please, Matthew. Thank you. Now, on this slide, I know it's a lot of information here, but don't be so daunted by this information here. This slide, I want you to consider Halliday and Hassan's cohesion analysis technique. Now, this is used by researchers to investigate cohesiveness, mostly in the first language. So here are 5 common devices which are used in English to develop cohesion. First one is referencing, reference. This is the use of pronouns, articles, and demonstratives to refer to previously mentioned information in the text. Example, the boy bounced a ball. He caught it deftly. What does it refer to? I visited Hungary last year. This was my first visit. What is this or that referring to? Discuss it with children. Next device is conjunctions. This refers to using connectors between 2 independent sentences, like and, also, but, yet, however. Again, discuss the use with children. Highlight it to the children. Lexical cohesion is the third device. This occurs when semantically related words are used throughout the text. For example, synonyms and antonyms. Reiteration, where we repeat the same word to create that effect. The fourth type is substitution. Now, this is the replacement of one element with another, which excludes personal pronouns. For example, noun substitution. He really wanted a red ball. Finally, he found one. Verb substitution. He wanted to draw pictures there, and they really did. Talk to children about the impact such writing has. The fifth way is ellipses. This refers to the omission of words which can be mentally derived from the linguistic context. Example, I was going to go but didn't. Would you like a cup of coffee? Yes, I would. So talk to children about how such language creates more impact. I understand on the surface these markers look really complex, but they're not as difficult to understand as they sound. Children love to know such technicalities of language. Although this does assume strong teacher subject knowledge. Next slide, please, Matthew. Thank you. So now I want you to consider some key issues with English language in a bit more detail. We'll look at formulaic phrases here. We know that the knowledge of formulaic expressions is a prerequisite for spoken language and writing development. And thus, learning to write well is a result of appropriate integration of such expressions into text. And we also know that EAL learners are more likely to use formulaic language if it is highlighted explicitly in the school curriculum. So on this slide, I've got some examples for you here, which can enable language learners to complete their writing tasks more easily. The examples given here, tell a lie, back to square one. Having said that, on the other hand, such language, what it does is it creates coherence. It produces well-organized texts, writing in different genres, improving overall writing performance, and helps children to sound like proficient users of target language. On the right-hand side is time phrases. The red ones are the correct form. Time phrases are those phrases that include some indication of time or timing. Again, they are formulaic phrases that generally begin with a preposition. And drawing attention to formulaic time phrases and the words inside them, collecting various types of these writings, is a really good way of helping EAL learners avoid the kind of mistakes that you can see on the screen as well. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Another issue with advanced EAL learners' writing can be the use of figurative language. On the left side, you see the correct versions. On the right side, you see common mistakes. Figurative language can be defined in a wide range of ways. It depends upon which class, which grade, which content area, and the purpose for which it is being used. But one thing is for sure, that the words or phrases, they are meant to be understood on a non-literal symbolic level. Some extra planning and attention is required. So why use such language? I fished my glasses out of my purse. A storm was brewing. They unveiled the plan as opposed to they opened or they revealed the plan. In the last quarter, the home team gained the upper hand instead of saying, in the last quarter, the home team won. They flocked to the concert instead of saying they went to the concert. Now, I show you these examples because these examples are word choices. Whether they are in spoken form, they are read in a text, or they are written by a writer, they definitely give English more power, more nuance, and more zing. They add that variety to the writing. So again, wherever you come across as teachers, it's a really good practice to highlight it to the children, discuss it with them, what impact it's creating for the reader. Next slide, please. Next type, one of the last types I'm going to discuss today, is the accurate use of verbs. Now, research shows that EAL writing, particularly the one which are advanced levels of writers, they contain errors in the endings and tenses of verbs. And that does impact the overall writing, the way it conveys the timings of the story particularly. So as with genres, the teaching of genres and the clause types and vocabulary, more advanced EAL learners need to develop a range of verb forms so that they are able to use it flexibly and accurately to express subtle shades of meaning. Again, wherever you see it in writing, highlight it to children so that it's added to the repertoire of their learning. Next slide, please. Now I want to talk about academic literacy, which I understand as children's ability to understand higher order textual language in order to access the curriculum and the learning that accompanies it. So to encourage effective writing for EAL children, teachers need to identify specific cultural and language features of particular genres and the corresponding academic language. During your pre-writing sessions, identify specific vocabulary and make sure you teach it explicitly. Provide opportunities for discussion as to why the writer has used such language. What is the impact on the reader? Keep it open for discussion. The next, again, to support deeper writing is the use of meta-language. Now, what does meta-language mean? It's the language required to discuss language learning. There are three main advantages, in my view, to use meta-language, to discuss the language. First thing, it helps learners to comprehend the cognitive demands of the text. They are able to process the information better. Secondly, it also helps writers to develop or understand their own appropriate stance in writing. What do I want to say? And how do I say it? What is my voice here? Thirdly, it provides writers a way to negotiate the stance. It's about having a convenient dialogue with the reader. This is what my understanding is. This is what I want to say. So it can be concluded that meta-language plays a facilitative role in written communication. Now I'd like to give you a small example for that. Next slide, please, Matthew. Thank you. Here you might have to refer to the chat box here. What I want you to do is, I want you to have a look at these 5 sentences. There's the difference between academic and everyday language. These 5 texts are in no particular order, and they all relate to the properties of magnet. So before going any further, I want you to try to order them. One is for a very everyday open language, and 4 or 5 towards that end of the spectrum will be more academic written language. Take a few seconds and please write in the chat box your order. Which one would you think is towards 1, everyday language, moving to the academic written language? Take a few seconds, please. Anyone wants to write it in the chat box? Well done. You can see James Walker's answers. The number 3 looks, it's sticking. Look at it. Okay. Anybody else wants to give it a go? Okay. Matthew, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Now, what we have got here is the background information for these texts. Left-hand side are the text, the sentences, and right-hand side is the background. Now, one of the major challenges for EAL learners is to understand the grammatical difference between spoken and written language. So if you see here, Text 1 was when the group was presenting their findings to the rest of the class. Text 2, university textbook. Text 3, it's a group talk. So you were right, James. Well done. Thank you. And text 4 and 5 are academic language from textbooks. So again, subject-specific vocabulary. So the idea is, the more you know the subject, the easier it becomes to read and interpret. So activities focused around collecting new information through group work, talk partners, modeling, done by teachers, they're all bridges to reading, which finally lead to more efficient, fluent writing. Next slide, please, Matthew. So as a summary now, let's have a look at what could more advanced EAL learners do, what can teachers do to support them, and how can we facilitate their writing. Firstly, there needs to be extensive opportunities to encounter and work with a range of genres of written English. Different types that are commonly taught in school are poems, story narratives, novels, arguments, recounts, your explanation texts. These are all different kinds of genres, but they have some things in common. They all come from a certain culture. They all have specific social purposes, and they have particular organizational features, as well as specific linguistic features. So make sure you highlight them explicitly to the children. Teach academic language linked with that particular topic or subject specifically. Use meta-language in a clear and detailed manner, making sure children understand how the use of particular kind of vocabulary or language is creating a certain kind of effect. And finally, when reading together or sharing text within the classroom, highlight the use of formulaic phrases, advanced tenses, cohesive devices, figurative language through a focus across the curriculum. Not just words or topics or particular subjects, do it all the time. Bring it to the attention of the children and discuss the appropriateness of the words or phrases. Children are far more likely to make use of such words, such phrases, such language in their writing if they can see it explicitly and they remember discussing it in the classroom. Next slide, please, Matthew. And here are my references, the links to the research that I have used. And if anybody wants to know more about this, the links are there. And I'm more than happy to provide. The last two are my writings. They are pre-publication drafts that I have. I'll send them off to Matthew. If anybody wants to read, more than welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Kawinda, and I'm sorry to the person who had difficulties accessing and listening, but everything will be recorded and shared afterwards. No, can you mute?
Sorry?
Could you mute yourself, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Now, there is some time for questions. So if anyone happens to have any questions, and I know Antonio has already raised their hand, please just raise your hand or write them in the chat box and we'll do our best to raise them. Antonio is saying she'd like to have the documents. That's absolutely fine. So what Ms. Kawinda has agreed to do is to share them with myself.
Yeah.
Email is in the chat box. I believe Kawinda's is also on a slide, and you can email either us and we'll just reply with the documents. Wonderful. If you've sent your email address in the chat box, that's fine. I'll send you them as soon as the talk is over. Does anyone else have any questions about the talk?
Anybody ever wants to have anything, if a question or something, my email is there on the slide. I'm more than welcome to happy to help and give advice, or if you need any sort of documents, looking for something, more than happy to help.
Brilliant. Well, Kawinda, why don't you put your email address in the chat box now, and then we'll move over to Rula and Noor's talk.
No problem.
So Noor is the primary EAL lead teacher at ICS currently, and she's been working in different parts of early years in English teaching for 8 years. That's Kawinda's email address in the chat now. Noor's worked across Abu Dhabi and ICS. I say she does an amazing job in the school at the moment, particularly working with younger learners and across the primary school. And then Rula is our secondary EAL lead teacher at ICS, and she's been working in EAL for 17 years across multiple schools. Now, ICS, give you a bit of a background, this is the first time we actually talked about what we do in our school. We've developed a range of EAL strategies working closely with the Bell Foundation, which I believe you're going to be introduced to today, as one potential EAL thing you can work with. One of the reasons we chose them is because they're entirely free and they've got lots of documents and tracking things that are great, but also they're also quite communicative and do some wonderful training courses. This is an advertisement for them, it's just we simply found them excellent to work with, although there is a range of other EAL companies and resource sites you can use. We'll be hoping to do a range of them over the next few series. So I believe I'm passing over to Noor now. Is that right, Noor? Okay.
Thank you. Just give me a minute to share my screen. Okay. So because I work with the little learners in school, basically I'm the EAL teacher for primary. So I deal with children from early years up until year 6. So I'll cover the EAL pedagogy in school and how to effectively teach EAL. And then I'll go into a few strategies that are mainly applicable for the older learners, but some of them can be adapted for the younger learners as well. So the context for EAL pedagogy, as you can see in the picture on the right, the children are learning English and learning through English. So we are teaching them English as well as teaching them for the curriculum in English. EAL teaching aims to teach English using the mainstream curriculum as a context. Specific teaching strategies and resources are therefore necessary to make the language of the curriculum accessible to learners who use EAL. The rationale for EAL pedagogy. So bilingualism and multilingualism are an asset, which are the ability to use one language is a valuable skill that learners who use EAL will bring with them, regardless of whether they are new to English or not. Learners actively use language they already know to learn English. So mostly if you can, like when you realize with the, especially the little learners or the ones that are recent to English, there's always a long thinking period where they would hear what you're saying, they would translate it and then speak, or there's just usually a delay from when an instruction or a question is given to them and the response that you're getting from the child. High expectations around cognitive challenge should be mentioned. Access to the curriculum is needed, but this does not imply the dumbing down of the content. So for example, if a learner from Greece might be highly skilled at maths, but using English as a language of instruction might be preventing the child from fully engaging in lessons. So they are a higher ability learner, but they're still comprehending and building up their fluency of the English language. Learner proficiency in English is closely linked to academic success. So research has found that proficiency in English is the strongest predictor on academic achievement. Effective practice for learners using EAL. So given the principles underpinning EAL pedagogy, effective practice for learners using EAL. So the first one is activating prior learning. Activities that enable learners to activate their prior knowledge of the topic of the lesson to facilitate greater understanding and engagement. So example strategies can include like basically just know what the language is, finding out what by through questioning what the child already knows, and you can build on that. Providing a rich context. So EAL learners will benefit from being provided with additional contextual support to help them make sense of the information conveyed to them in English. So this could be through the use of images and graphs, or just like the child on the right, you can see they've used the post-it notes to write and post them on the different parts of the body. Making the English language explicit in the classroom. So within the context of the curriculum, learners with EAL can be encouraged to notice the language used and understand how to use it. This implies pointing out key forms and structures that allow pupils to meet the language demands of the tasks. Strategies include providing oral and written models and scaffolding speaking and writing through speaking and writing frames. The fourth one, developing learners' independence. So the independence of learners who use EAL can be fostered by developing their organizational thinking and social skills, such as working cooperatively with others and taking turns and asking for help. So you need to encourage the children to use as much language in the classroom by questioning, asking questions, sharing, presenting. So this is one of the reasons where the classrooms have flipped from a traditional classroom where the teachers just talk with instructions and the children do. So in terms of organizational and thinking skills, teachers can provide learners with opportunities to model and extend what has been taught and support them in developing note-taking and summary writing skills. Social and cultural norms in a classroom will need to be made explicit to learners, because some learners might, it depends on the background of the child. So for example, a child from Japan, in schools in Japan, it's inappropriate to look a teacher in the eye, while most of us expect eye contact when talking to the children. The last one, which is supporting learners with EAL to extend their vocabulary. EAL learners at all levels need to be given opportunities to grow their English vocabulary range. This could be done by taking advantage of their language through translation, the use of flashcards and images. It is important to develop the learner's academic language skills, for example, by focusing on the difference between formal and informal vocabulary. So, supporting higher ability EAL learners. So these are a few brief points on how you can support an EAL learner in the early years and Key Stage 1. So I like to use the feelings chart at the beginning of every lesson, where I would ask each child, how are they feeling? They would answer or point to the picture, and then we would say what that feeling is, using and prompting full sentences, and then they would explain why they're feeling, let's say, hot or happy or poorly or confused. So with the little ones, using visual aids is very important. Parental support, just to make sure that we're on the same page at home as we are at school. Differentiated activities depending on the level of the child. Focus on vocabulary and language. Learning through play is very important for the little ones, because that's how you engage them into an activity, build on vocabulary, and positive reinforcement and praise. As for the Key Stage 2 learners, some of these strategies can also be implemented on the younger learners as well. So not all these strategies will work for you, and not all of them will work for your teaching style or the children that you deal with, but most of them might be an asset to just try in the classroom. So allow choice. Try to offer more than one way for your students to show what they know. It is essential for advanced learners to dig deeper into the subject or activity. So offer a range of texts, ask deeper questions, do the research, get creative. Just allow as much open-ended questions and materials as possible, depending on what they want to inquire into. Integrate technology. So including technology in the classroom forms a powerful bridge from academic to the real world. So, and it offers varied learning options. Let learners work together. So for advanced learners, working with peers is important. It helps them, and it also helps them build social and emotional skills. You can pair them up. You can group all the advanced learners in the classroom together for an activity or a special project, or you can also group the advanced learners across all classes. So that applies for both EAL learners and the children that are already in the classroom, non-EAL learners. Accommodate pace. So advanced learners acquire new concepts and knowledge quickly. It is important to respond to this quicker pace of learning by providing advanced learners with more challenging and engaging activities. Determine prior knowledge. So find out what they have mastered, give them credit for their knowledge and skills they possess, and help them create alternative goals. And encourage. So give the advanced learners opportunities to set their own learning goals. have the weekly or daily schedule visible in the classroom, because some or most advanced learners need to see and process the day's activities. And they're usually the ones that come up and start asking, what are we doing down now? When will we be done? What's next? What's new? So if it's visual, if it's in front of them, it helps them process and preempt what's coming next. Teach creatively, and that doesn't always apply to just drawing and painting. Advanced learners tend to be out-of-the-box thinkers, so they sometimes need alternative ways to process information. Okay, independent learning projects. So when possible, give and encourage independent projects. It only works when the students have opportunities to practice and develop the skills that they need. So if they go off topic with questions, just encourage these questions. Like, for example, I had 2 year sixes who were curious about why the globe-shaped rug in my classroom was flat and it wasn't a sphere. So one of the child went into flat earth theory. So we Googled it, they didn't understand what we were talking about. So we went on a hunt around the school, we found a Play-Doh, formed a sphere, flattened it, and then one of the boys' comments was, so now that the ocean is in the center, Africa will drown. So we Googled to see. So it went completely off topic from our grammar lesson, but they inquired, they asked, we researched, and we came up with an activity on our own. So that's okay sometimes to go off topic, especially if it intrigues their interests and it encourages writing, asking questions, talking, presenting in a classroom. Follow their interests, so that also relates back to encourage independent learning, and the last one, encourage self-assessment, which just encourage the students to take anecdotal notes, respond to learning experiences. Questions can vary according to age group. Self-evaluation and reflect on their work is also good. So one thing I always do with my children, especially when it's a writing activity now that we're online, so we go ahead with the lesson, they do their work independently, and then the next day we go over their work and we correct it together. And that's it for me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Nona will be available to answer questions on primary EL after the presentation, as well as Ms. Kulwinder and Ms. Rula as well. So Rula, I believe it's on to you now for the secondary spin on supporting the more advanced EL learners. Thank you very much, Nur, for talking about primary, and Rula, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, let me present. Share. Thank you, Matthew, for the introduction. And I will be going through some classroom support strategies for advanced EL learners in secondary. This is not an advert, as Matthew said. This is not an advertisement for the Bell Foundation. But honestly, I mean, we've started using the Bell Foundation, and it actually made our life much easier. Instead of technically guessing or trying to use waves for students and trying to put them in categories, the EAL assessment framework just works wonders. I mean, if I will show you now, because we all know that learning an additional language is not the same as early years, first language development. So the EAL assessment framework is really, I mean, a very sensitive tool that will help you recognize your pupils' language achievements and needs. We have 4 categories. We have listening, speaking, and we have 5 bands. We start with band A, which is absolute beginner, and we end with band D, where we have the advanced learners, band D and E. We also have the speaking, and then we have reading and viewing, and we have one for writing. There are also descriptors for each band, and these descriptors would actually guide you through your planning and it would help you set goals for your students, because they are very detailed. And once the student, has gone through all of the descriptors, not in any kind of order. I've included, by the way, the link for the Bell Foundation website. It's for free, and you can just register, and then you can access everything from the assessment framework to the support strategies, and they have loads of resources that you could use. For example, if you're teaching Macbeth, or they have a lot of EAL resources. We can look at typical challenges for advanced learners. The low verbal reasoning scores compared to their performance in non-verbal tests, which means that you need to focus on the language. We could have so many students who are excelling technically. They come from other schools where their maths, for example, is of a higher level, and then they feel that they can't really understand the instructions just because of the language barrier. They could have problems with reading comprehension, trying to express themselves. They might, seem fluent for you, but they may have, some problems with literacy, with, the level of vocab needed to express themselves in writing. Sometimes they may seem fluent for you because they are basically reproducing words that they've heard. However, when you actually look at their writing, it looks as if it's like it's with phonetic approximation of what they heard. They may write in length, at length, but with short, simple sentences. I'm sure that Kulwinder has explained a lot about the writing. So I am going to move to the support strategies. We have 4 categories. We have the ongoing differentiation, which is basically something that you could use with all of your students. Language focus, marking and feedback, and communication with home. All of these are from the Bell Foundation website. I've actually chosen a few. They have loads of other things, and I've just chosen the ones that I feel that you could use all the time. So giving them practice of reading and comprehending, giving them a strict time limit really helps to make them focus and try to do the task during the allotted time. Again, cultural references. When you are reading, you need to maybe explain a bit more. And then you need to train them to answer the questions. For example, I have a year 11 student who is actually now sitting his IGCSEs, and he's taking English as a second language, and trying very, very hard to train him to be able to answer exam questions by highlighting key command words, underlining keywords. This is very important. Whenever you're discussing any fiction text, you need to basically discuss the literary techniques, because it's kind of a challenge for them. This is more for speaking and listening. When you're in a classroom, you are technically the role model. So maybe you need to clearly repeat the vocabulary that you are using, because sometimes, if, for example, an EAL learner is sitting at the back and, it's not very clear, he can't really listen to what you're saying, then you need to try basically to keep them in the front. It does help when they actually see you, hear you better, and see your facial expressions. You need to give them some thinking time. For example, if you want to ask an EAL learner a question, give them time to actually think about their answer. For example, tell them, you are going next, or you will answer this question next. Try to give them opportunities by starting a question to give them more complex questions. What would happen if? What could you have done differently? Is there any evidence for? And all of these questions that would help them think deeper. Of course, there's figurative language idioms that are definitely very difficult for EAL learners. So you need to somehow explain it to them in order for them to fully understand the text. For speaking and listening, you need to give them an opportunity, because, for example, when I support my students in their classrooms, for example, I support them in geography, I support them in history, and then they come to me for their EAL lesson, and they probably haven't said 2 words during, their lessons, their other lessons. They need to have the opportunity to actually speak, because they're very shy, usually. Even if they are advanced, they still feel that, standing in front of, let's say, 15 students and giving a short speech or presenting something is difficult for them. So giving them a chance to actually prepare a speech in EAL lessons, and maybe a debate, especially if you have small groups in EAL lessons, that would really, really help. So make sure that they always have dictionaries, their online dictionaries. They could use their phones if it's allowed in school. Now we move on to language focus. I am not going to focus a lot about reading and writing, because Kulwinder has done a wonderful job. So basically, what we do, for example, in order to expand the students' vocabulary, we have this very nice activity that was run by the head of English, and we have it's called Literacy Monday. So every Monday, we have, as form tutors, we have to share a higher level word provided by the head of English with our students when we're in form time. And then we have a set of activities that we could run during form time. And then every student, whether they're EAL or not, would try to use that new word, that higher level word, in a sentence during their lessons. Every lesson, like in geography and history, they would try to use that word correctly in a sentence, and they get rewarded for that. They get a polio point. That's our rewarding system. So again, for speaking and listening, we need to model vocabulary. We need to make sure that it's very, very clear what we're saying. We need to continue to do that by, for example, maybe giving them a notebook. And this would be just for the new words that they are learning. You could have 2 columns, one for English and then for the meaning, and then the meaning in their own language, the meaning in English, and then the word in their own language. Because somehow, even if you explain it in English, sometimes they never understand it unless they actually translate the word into their own language. And you have to, of course, make sure that, because sometimes you have more than one meaning for a word, make sure that the meaning that they got is in their own language is the one needed for the text. So That's another challenge, where you have, for example, if I'm sitting with the boy who's in year 11, and we're looking at a history text, I need to make sure that when he looks up the word, this is the word that's needed. So he tries to explain it to me after he looks up the meaning in Japanese, and then I try to explain it in English again, and that's how we make sure that we have the correct meaning. Now we move on to marking and feedback. So it's very important for the students to know exactly how to develop the writing. You need to have some sort of maybe an error correction code, maybe show them what they need to do. I find that, for example, with my EAL learners, the best thing to do is, for example, to start the writing with a model paragraph. Like, I give them the paragraph. This is the introduction of the story. And then they have to continue the story. So they can actually look at that paragraph and, look at the verb tenses, look at the sentence structure, and continue. And this really, really helps them in terms of, for example, if there is quotations, dialogue, whatever, they can actually copy the punctuation and continue using their own words, their own plot. And this is something that I've been doing, and it's very, very successful with them. They like it. So we are basically, we need to communicate with home, communicate with the parents. If, for example, let's say the EAL learner is doing Macbeth, and if he's actually read the play in his own language, that would really, really help him understand what the play is about. So if you can have resources at school or maybe online that are in the students' native language, that would help them maybe try and read it at home, and then they would come to school at least with an idea of what the text is about. If you can inform the parents about the topics that are covered, they could actually research and discuss it in their first language or in English at home, and then the student will come to class prepared for the topic. He would have, at least some ideas. This is something that, by the way, this is something that I do with the advanced students. This is what I call pre-teaching, or what we all call pre-teaching. So we talk with the subject teacher, we communicate, and then we have a plan. So, for example, if they're focusing on, let's say, World War II in history, I would pre-teach all of the keywords, look them up during the EAL lesson, and that would help the student go back to the English lesson, to the history lesson, fully prepared for the topic.
2 minutes remaining, Ruben.
Yeah, okay. And this is the link for the Bell Foundation website. Honestly, it's a treasure. Okay, thank you so much. Stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you very much, Farida. Thank you very much, Noah. And thank you so much, Kulwinder. Thank you so much. I've found those 3 speeches very interesting and lots of really formative advice. So before we ask if there are any questions, I'm just going to do a shameless plug for the BSME Network EAL page. Here you'll find there's curriculum discussions, assessment examination discussions, as well as all the resources from today I will put up on the shared resources. And if you have any excellent EAL resources, please do put them up as well. We can really try and build something beautiful here. And finally, you can ask a question, although you've yet to have any questions the entire year. And you can even find the previous webinars as well as today's, which will be put up here. The next webinar is on the 21st of June, where we'll be looking at working with parents. And I'm very excited about that one as well. So Does anyone have any questions for today? Otherwise, we shall wrap it up. In that case, thank you so much, Kawinda. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Rula, again. I thought they were excellent, really high quality. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope to see you at the next EAL webinar on the 21st of June. Otherwise, have a wonderful break if you're on a break. Have a wonderful school experience if you're in school. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Kawinda. It was lovely to meet you.
Bye-bye. Lovely to meet you too. Bye-bye.
Bye, Matthew. Bye, Kawinda.
Bye-bye. Bye, Noor.